Hi, I'm Greg Convis. Our guest this week on Veterans Chronicles is Charles Convis. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran of World War II in the Pacific Theater, and he joins me now at the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima being commemorated here in the Washington, D.C. area. Mr. Convis, thank you very much for your time, sir.
My pleasure.
Where were you born and raised, sir?
Pardon?
Where were you born and raised, sir?
In Bottineau County, North Dakota, Lansford, North Dakota.
What did your family do?
The farmers.
Where were you, how old were you when you joined the service?
Well, that's a long story. I was either 16 or 17. I lied a little about my age.
Why did you join the Marine Corps?
Why?
Yes.
I wanted to be a Marine.
Any particular reason?
No, I don't know. Nobody in my family I knew that had been in the Marines, but I don't know.
So after you signed up, where did you go for training?
At Camp Pendleton.
California.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Rugged. It was hard work, but I was a North Dakota kid.
What were you trained for? Infantry?
Field artillery fire control. We were the ones that gave the instructions to the people on the gun about where to point it and how high and all that stuff.
When were you deployed?
Where was I deployed?
When were you deployed? When were you sent overseas?
Oh, I think it was in 45. No, it was 44, I guess.
And where did you go?
Maui, Hawaiian Islands.
What did you do there?
I joined the 4th Division, what they call the rear echelon. They had already taken off for battles of Saipan and Tinian, and I wasn't in those battles. I was joined the regiment back there, and we did some training, did some road building, and waited for the guys to come back from Tinian, Marshall Islands.
What was it like to be included in a unit that had already seen combat when you hadn't yet?
I was impressed. They were nice guys.
So once you were all together, how long were you in Hawaii before you went back out?
You know, I don't know. I haven't thought about that for a while. It was several months. We trained on Maui and landed. We went from there to Iwo Jima, and that was the first combat I was in.
What were you thinking when you knew your first combat experience was getting closer, that you would soon be at war?
Well, I was ready to go.
Were you more energized than fearful at that point?
Yeah, I don't think we were afraid of it much. We just wanted to go do our duty.
All right, so take me to the day that you came ashore.
At Iwo?
At Iwo, yes, sir.
Well, I landed on the first day. We climbed down the rope ladders into the landing boats, Higgins boats. We went in and landed at, I forgot the name of the bay. It was the pretty much the far left end of the island, below this peak. And we landed there. I mean, they dropped the thing down, we ran off and did our duty.
So what happened when you got to shore?
Well, I was a forward observer with the artillery, and we didn't even have any guns in yet. was in a 105 howitzer battalion, 25th Marines. And it looked like the best thing for us to do was to get kind of across the island. And so we just kept moving till I got it. By nightfall, I was across the island. That's the narrow part right down close to the Suribachi. And then we spent the night there. And next morning, when the sun came up, we could see a howitzer, 105 howitzer. We had one battalion of 75s and 3 battalions of 105s. I think it was 3, yeah. And we could see a howitzer, so we went back and about where we had landed the night before, but we'd crossed the island once, and then we went back over, and there was quite a bit of fire going on, gunfire. But we got our guns in and howitzers in, and gradually got them effective. They weren't really lined up like in training. You just kind of stick them where they can.
What was your objective?
Well, the overall objective was to take that island, but
Sure.
the immediate objective was I was in what they call fire control, where we had to take the messages from the forward observers to translate those into so many clicks on the up or down or right or left. And you get one, well, you kind of survey the howitzers in when you can, and then you just get one of them lined up, and they're all following the same direction but not firing. And then when you get them all going with it, you start shooting.
So you're giving them the coordinates.
Yeah.
And how accurate were those shots?
Well, I think they're accurate, but we weren't the ones up. We were the ones back with the guns. And we had forward observers that were telling us what to do, and then we'd transform that into clicks on the guns. And
Gotcha. Okay. Did you face much resistance? Were the Japanese firing at you?
oh yeah, they weren't happy at us at all.
What was that like to be under fire?
You don't think a lot about it. You got a job to do, and you do it. You know, you don't pay a lot of attention to the noise and explosions.
How tough was it to get a direct hit with all the rock and all the bunkers they built up?
I don't know. You know, it's hard to say because I was back with the guns, and the forward observer would be somebody on ahead of ways.
Did they radio back and tell you,
Yeah,
great hit?
up. No, not
exactly
great
that.
hits. Up 2 notches, up, down, right, left, or so forth. And we'd be firing one gun until we got it right, but then they'd let go of the whole battalion, and not the whole battalion, whole battery.
How long were you in that initial position with the guns?
Well, as long as we were on the island.
You stayed in that same spot the whole time?
We moved around some.
Okay.
We moved some forward, but not a lot.
How aware were you of how the larger battle was going?
I don't know. I don't recall that we had much information about what the infantry were doing. But we knew a little bit about it because some of the guys up there would radio back. So.
And since you didn't have to move your guns much, it sounds like you controlled your area pretty effectively.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there weren't any Japanese around close by, on foot, a few, but not many.
Did they make any of those bonsai runs at you?
I don't remember any personally to me or to us, but there were Japanese around, and they weren't happy.
So
They were shooting at us.
were you mainly shooting at specific targets of bunkers and so forth? Were you shooting at people? What were the general orders?
I don't recall much about that. It was kind of hectic. I just recall mostly getting the information and transferring that into clicks on the gun, up or right or left or whatever. And that was where our job ended. We were let's say the forward observers for the artillery pieces, telling them where to point, when to shoot.
How many hours a day would you say you were engaged? Was it around the clock? Was it during?
About all of them.
All 24 hours a day?
You get some sleep now and then.
How long did it take to become an expert on the clicks and the guns? Was it pretty quick?
Pretty quick. We learned fast.
What was the camaraderie like in your unit day after day?
We all got along well with it. Nobody was mad at anybody. We were all buddies. We were all in it together.
Yes, sir. What was your reaction when well, let's back up a bit. Were you at a vantage point where you could see the flag at the top of the mountain?
That was a few days later. I remember seeing some guys were pointing, and we looked up and we could see the flag that was raised up on the top.
What did that feel like?
That was, I don't recall that was the first day. I think it was 3 or 4 days before we had a flag up there.
It was about 4 days, I believe.
Yeah.
What did that do for you? Did it improve morale? Was it a sign that things were going well for you?
Oh,
How did
yeah,
you react to it?
right. But we weren't looking for size. We were just trying to do our job.
Sure, absolutely. So how many days in a row were you engaged? Was it all 31 days?
Yeah, we were engaged all the time. We were there till the battle was over.
How would you describe the exhaustion when it was over?
I don't really remember sleeping very much. It wasn't like daytime and nighttime. It was just all the same time, and you got a few winks when you could. We were pretty tired most of the time.
When you got back to your ship, when it was all over, did you get a lot of sleep at that?
Yeah. I don't really recall a lot about being back on the ship. I remember leaving the ship and going down the rope ladders into the landing boats. But I don't remember a lot about the ship after we went back to it.
Do you have memories of learning of how costly the battle had been? How many American lives? And what it was like?
Not for a long time.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
What did you do after the battle?
Well, they called me up into the, for some officer, I don't know, it was a lieutenant colonel or somebody, and asked if I'd like to go back and go to college. And said, sounded good to me. So they sent me back to go to, actually I chose Purdue.
Boilermaker.
Right. I went there for a semester and a half. And in my second semester, the Japanese surrendered. And I thought I was going back overseas, and I appeared one day before the officers in charge of this V-12 program. It was a V-12 program at Purdue, and they said that, well, I don't remember for sure. I know I went home to North Dakota for a brief furlough while I was going to Purdue. And then I went back to Purdue, and they called me back again. And in the meantime, my mother died when I was only a year old, so I didn't visit, pretty much visited just with my dad. And he had gone to the Pontano County Red Cross and started some procedures going there for me to get a discharge to come back and help on the family farm. That's what it was for. I didn't know anything about that. So I thought I was going back overseas. And then they called me down to the office and said, we just wanted to make sure we got all your papers right before you go back to North Dakota. And I had sense enough to keep my mouth shut. And sure enough, I got put on a train and discharged. What was interesting about that was when we boarded ship to go overseas, we went up the gangplank and they handed us a little bag about 8 by 10 with a kind of a thing that closed and you could hang it around your neck if you wanted. And inside was a pack of cigarettes and bar candy, everything a Marine needed to know. But also a little paper and saying where they were from. Mine came from the Pontano County Red Cross. Well, I didn't think anything about that at that time. But the interesting thing is, I got discharged because my dad went to the Pontano County Red Cross and they pulled the strings to get me discharged to go back and help on the family farm. I always thought that was a great coincidence.
That's an amazing coincidence.
Right.
That's great.
And I went back and helped on a family farm like I said I would.
Okay.
That's how I got out.
Well, let me ask you about the guns a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because we talked about the clicks and the aiming and so forth. Just briefly explain how they work. How do you feed in the shells and how do you fire them and that sort of thing?
You know, I don't remember. I think we had an aiming circle, it was called. It was like a compass, but we call them aiming circles. And we had there'd be a forward observer up there saying down right or right 12 or 10 or 15 or whatever. And we had some kind of like slide rules, but they weren't really slide rules. They were some kind of instrument that we held, and we transferred those into clicks on the gun. Then we would tell the gun battery, it'd be one, you might have 5 or 6 guns, not lined up in a line, but kind of pretty close to each other. And we were telling one of them that those shots were translating these forward reserver things into clicks on the gun, and so but they all did the same thing on the guns, although only one of them was firing. And when we finally it didn't take all that amount of time, but we get that right. Then we'd tell them fire away, and as far as the Japanese were concerned, there'd be a shell here and bang, bang, bang. Then all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of them down. And that was the end of the Japs.
They stayed quiet after that.
Yeah.
Wow. What does it mean to you to be part of the Battle of Iwo Jima and the significance in our history?
Well, I was proud of my outfit. Meant a lot to me. All the time I was in the Corps, I'd run across guys now and then that had been in that battle. It was nice to be a veteran.
Now it's been 75 years since the battle. What do you want?
It's been a long time.
What do you want the younger generations to know about what you and your fellow Marines did there?
Well, no, we just had a strong feeling that we were doing what needed to be done by our country, for our country. And we did it. And I don't know that I have any sage words of advice to anybody. I don't.
What kind of relationships and friendships developed from that?
Oh, quite a few. I stayed in touch with guys that I had known in that for a long time.
Did you ever go back to the island?
No, I've never been back.
Any desire to go back?
Not really. No.
One of the things that we've studied in preparation for these interviews is how the expectation on the beach was for sand, but it turned out to be ash. Did that affect you and your men at all?
I don't remember even noticing that. I've read that now and then, but I have no memory nor experience of that. I remember landing on the beach. The best thing to do was to get as far forward as you could and dig a hole quick.
So did you not meet much resistance when you first came ashore? It sounds like you got to the other side of that narrow part of the island fairly quickly, but I don't want to assume that.
Yeah, it took a day. We landed fairly early in the forenoon, maybe by 9 or 10 o'clock. And by evening, we were across the island.
And how much resistance did you face?
I don't remember particularly. It was a lot of, I'd say a lot, but I wasn't counting.
Right, sure. But a lot of resistance
Oh, yes.
was seen that day.
Yeah, they didn't want us around.
What do you see as the significance of winning the Battle of Iwo Jima in the ultimate victory in the Pacific Theater?
I don't know what you mean by it.
How important was it to win that battle in getting to ultimately win the
Well,
war?
I think it was very important. You know, later on, it took some more islands, but south of there. But I think that was, I don't know. It seemed like there was another division in there then. I don't recall. I was back in the States by then.
What are you most proud of from your service?
Just knowing the guys that I was with, they were pretty fine people.
As are you, sir. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time with us today. We greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We've been talking to Chuck Convis. He is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran of World War II, veteran of the Battle of Iwo Jima, now 75 years ago. I'm Greg Convis. This is Veterans Chronicles. Great.
Thanks. There's a couple things, like Dad's memory isn't what it used to be, but long story short, he made up a name when he was 17 because he wanted to be a Marine, but they weren't taking 17-year-olds, so he walked in.
Oh,
He
yeah.
said, I'm Steve Mahoney, and I just turned 18 today.
That's right.
And so there was a lot of conversation back and forth with his dad that he knew they were going to read letters, so he had to write as Steve Mahoney. And so, but then my grandpa writes to Dad in San Diego right before he started to ship out and says, Dear Steve, if you see my son Les, Chuck, can you tell him that he has to report to the thing? So Dad has to go up to the colonel and say, I'm not Steve Mahoney, I'm Chuck Convis. And
Right.
so they basically said, okay, fine,
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
fix everything.
Can we get that on camera?
Yeah. I thought, well, and there's the other, so Dad, tell that story on camera. Well, tell that story again about going in and saying that you're Steve Mahoney, but then talk about Grandpa's letter to you and how you thought you got in trouble for, lying about your name.
Well, while I was in Cheyenne in high school, I applied for the Navy V5 program. That was what the elder Bush went through. He got to be a pilot out of V5. Well, was in that, but I hadn't heard from them by the time I graduated, so that's ended up going to Alaska, working on a halibut fishing boat. And then I came back, decided that I was going to wait any longer. I was just going to get it over with and enlist in the Marines. But I already had enlisted, I had applied for that Navy V5 program. So that's why I became, I don't know where I got the name Steve Mahoney from. I had an uncle named John A. McCaney, my mother's brother, but I don't think it was, it may have been, I don't know. Anyhow, I became Steve Mahoney and went to the draft board in Springfield, Missouri, where my dad lived, and signed up for the draft like I was 18 years old, and I wasn't 18 years old yet. And I waived the waiting period. I said, I'm ready to go. So they sent me up to St. Louis, and I got drafted. And the day I went through the draft, I knew that the Marine Corps was taking guys that were about being drafted, and taking them in the Marine Corps when they had a need for them. So it turned out that the day I was there, I told the draft people that I wanted to be in the Marines, and they were taking them. And they took me, and we went over to I guess it was a Marine Corps station. Now this is just south of St. Louis. It was a famous Western fort there. I've forgotten the name of it now. And I can remember him talking to us. He says, "No, we're going to do this and that." And he says, "But if you want to be a real Marine, join the regulars instead of just going in the reserves for the duration plus 6 months." Well, of course, I wanted to be a real Marine. I was the only one, I think, that's where I became a real Marine, was in St. Louis. And so while I'm Steve Mahoney, don't ask me where I got the name. It sort of was like my mother's maiden name, McCaney. But while I'm writing to my dad now, and I asked him after the war got out, I said, "What did you think?" He said, "I thought you were a spy." Because I was writing to my dad. I can't explain, all our mail was censored that we mailed out from boot camp. And he wrote to me, but anyhow, I was a non-swimmer, in spite of the fact that I had done a lot of swimming around and living with my dad in Missouri and stuff. I never really learned how to swim. And so I'm going down there in San Diego to the special, they call it I don't know, some kind of a special platoon that you have to go through to pass the swimming test. And it's hard to get all that straightened out. I remember I got a letter from him. It says, he got a letter from the Navy. My right name is Charles Convis, that I had been accepted in the Navy V4 program, and I was ready to, I think it was called V4. I don't know. Anyhow, it was Elder Bush got to be a naval pilot through that program. Of course, by that time I had given up, had gone to Alaska and got on a fishing boat, and I came back and got enlisted as Steve Mahoney. Anyhow, I got a letter from my dad. It says, "Dear Steve, if you see my son Charles at any place, tell him there's a letter here that he's to report for duty at some place in Iowa, I think. I don't know. Cedar Rapids, I think it was." So anyhow, I had been selected finally, but by this time I'm in the Marine Corps. So I went down to give up. And I explained to I think he was a major, I'm not sure. And I thought I was going to San Quentin for sure, because, I told all these lies, and here I am. And I heard him say, when I got all through, staring with my eyes riveted about 3 feet above his head, telling him all the lies I'd told. I heard him say, "Well, son, you got the choice." And as soon as he said that, I knew I wasn't going to San Quentin. I was be relieved. He told me they would either change my name and send me back to the Navy, where I was supposed to be going to the V5 program. They changed my name, or I could just keep the name. It was up to me. And so I told him I'd rather stay. I was tired of telling lies. So I've seen my papers, what do you call it? Service record book. And they just crossed out my name, Steve Mahoney, and wrote in there Charles L. Convis. And I guess that's the case still. Anyhow, I became Charles L. Convis. That was in San Diego. When I finished the swimming course, and that's when they sent me overseas. It's a long story, but
How about that story? That's great. Sir, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thanks.